Then there is the whole question of credibility. And in different parts of the world, the debate is at different stages. When we're coming to the European arena, there is already not much more discussion about sustainability. If you talk to public procurement officials in the UK, basically they say, look, as long as it meets the central point of expertise, it's a credible system. But this here, for example, is the Dutch procurement policy. And the Dutch procurement policy, the top one here is actually a summary of PEFC's assessment. And the one underneath is a summary of FSC's assessment. And in every case, I have to point out, if you score a 0 anywhere, you're not considered as sustainable. Now, there are criteria here, and they've involved hundreds of thousands of man-hours to assess the certification systems outside some of the emotions which we sometimes find on the debate, which hopefully are going to become a thing of the past as more and more of these policies are created, and that allow you then to concentrate on promoting your products rather than worrying about whether one system is better than the other. But you can see here that both systems also have, there's 3 here, there's 4, they will all have areas that we can make improvements on. We know that, and that's part of our process, part of the continuous improvement. We're actually very, very pleased and proud that the PEFC was further assessed for an extra criterion about how we assess certification systems. Are we credible at assessing national certification systems? And in order to do that, because of some negative reporting about PEFC, the Dutch procurement policy took 20% of our schemes and assessed them independently, over and above us being assessed. And one of them was the Australian forestry standard. And all of those standards have come out as exemplar. And the Australian forestry standard is probably one of the ones that's been assessed more than any other certification system in the world. And you come out tops. So you should be very proud of your standard, and you should be very proud of all the certification and all the certified products that come out of your certification. Another example here is the UK one. It requires 70%. And the reason I show you the UK one and the Dutch one is because they also form the basis of the criteria which were used for the Australian Green Buildings Council. So it does have some relevance. It's not just because it happens to be from my home country that I can show it to you. But here the UK one requires that there is 70% of meeting of the requirements before you can be considered as sustainable. Well, actually, the 2 top certification systems here, FSC scored at the last assessment 92%, PEFC scored 89%, and with the new changes that we've brought in 2010, we're up for getting reassessed later this year. We reckon that we're going to be up at 97%, but we have to then look at some of the other assessments, and here's one of the latest assessment which was done by the World Bank WWF Alliance. They created a document. That alliance no longer exists, but the documentation is still used to assess certification systems. And when it came to looking at economic, ecological, and equity dimensions of forest management, you can see that PEFC fulfills all of the requirements for the criteria which were assessed for 2010. Government procurement policies are increasingly accepting certification. You can see that the European guidelines on green procurement also recommend PEFC and FSC. There is a thing called the EU Eco-Label, and it only accepts, and its whole premise is that it only accepts the top 10% of anything. So whenever you see an Eco-Label, it's the top 10% of any product range, and they have criteria, whether it's for furniture, for paper, or for any other product. You know, as others meet that benchmark, they will increase the criteria. But both FSC and PEFC have been brought in to qualify for getting that EU Eco-Label. And of course, then there are a lot of retailers getting further involved and using the certification to communicate to their customers. And then there are, of course, the Green Building Councils all around the world. The only exception is the North American one, the US Green Buildings Council. For some reason, it still seems to have an emphasis on something called FSC or better. I've always assumed that we're better. I'll give FSC the gold standard. They can be the gold standard as long as they accept that I'm the platinum standard. I'm happy with that. But on the certification front, it's sort of strange that for green buildings, and that for example, it is actually, you get more points by putting a bicycle rack outside your building than you do for using certified wood, and surely something's wrong with that. When we think about all the embedded energy and all the carbon that is sequestrated into wood and wood-based products. So there's still some work to do on some of the policies, but I think that, you know, I'm very glad to see that the Green Building Council here in Australia has taken the lead, and other green building councils around the world are now beginning to see sense in that area. So increasingly, wood from certified sources are being used. But there are some challenges that we have. The certified area has grown. This is the areas for PEFC. We're now at 245 million hectares. That makes up about 10%, along with FSC's 130 million hectares, that makes up about 10% of the world's forest. But there are some challenges which go with this. 5 years ago, we did a strategic review and we set ourselves some targets and some goals, and we were at 8% globally, both PEFC and FSC, as the area that is actually, forest area that is actually certified. We were hoping that by 2017 we'll be up at 14%, but actually in 5 years we've only gone up 1%. And the reason for that is to do with actual procurement policies of companies who give a preference to one certification system. And what that does is it forces certification systems to start defending market share. It's always easier to certify an already certified forest to another badge. It's much more difficult to expand into new areas such as, you know, Asia and Russia and Latin America to get more areas certified than it is to try and persuade somebody who's already certified just to swap a badge. So, for example, we've seen that we've had 5 years ago, only 1% of all FSC and PEFC certified forests were double certified. We're now sitting nearer at 10%, and that is because policies are actually encouraging people to get involved in market share defense rather than expanding the certified area. And I'm asking companies to stop doing that, have an inclusive approach, because that way you can help us, the certification movement, PEFC and our colleagues in FSC, to concentrate on expanding the overall certified area rather than trying to swap badges or defend market share. So it's an important message which I want to give. But those forests are responsible for about 26% of the world's industrial roundwood production. And from the presentation that we had just earlier on here, looking at some of the companies and benchmarking the companies, you can see that the paper sector is already doing a lot better than that. And 2/3 of all that certified area and volume is within PEFC. But most of those forests are, apart from the 10 million hectares that you have here in Australia, but most of those forests are in the Northern Hemisphere. And half of the world's certified forest area is actually in North America. This is actually a chart which shows you the percentage of the overall land base you know, in that continent. But North America has over 180 million hectares of forest. And Europe has about 82 million hectares of forest, and they make up 1/4 of the world's certified forest area. But the challenge here is, how do we increase sustainable forest management in the other parts of the world and to allow products to come onto the marketplace from there? Only 1% of the world's tropical forests are currently certified, and the tropical forests in the world make up half of the world's forests. So there's some challenges ahead of us. I showed you the tree earlier on when I showed you the value tree of how companies have so many issues to deal with. But even the certification movement has suddenly been asked to get involved in so many more issues. There are obviously legality. Can you actually make sure that your system totally covers all the aspects of each region's legality systems? So we have to work that in. There is the question of biomass and biofuels, and I'll give you a short example there, that there was a certification system set up in Europe which was looking at only 3 criteria for sustainable forest management. Well, these guys are competing for the same wood as you are, okay? They're using, you know, the paper sector and the biomass sector are competing for the same wood, and they thought they could get away with 3 criteria when you have 207. No. That's a no-no. So we've now been working with people to say, look, if you've got sustainable forest management, then you need to have a level playing field. So we're now working with them to ensure that PEFC and FSC certification are built into their certification system, leveling that playing field and getting down to the competition between products again then with a more level playing field than you would have if basically you only had to follow 3 criteria for sustainability. Carbon accounting, water footprinting, even for life cycle analysis, these are areas that are very, 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 very important because, for example, the Sustainability Consortium, representing 100 of the largest companies in the world, is looking at developing a life cycle analysis approach to actually give products with a life cycle label on it. So far as forestry is concerned, they were only interested in the products when they came in at the factory gate. We're quite keen to make sure that if people are looking at life cycle analysis, they do this from cradle to grave, and they actually include the elements of what's actually happening within the forests, because there are so many aspects which are important for life cycle purposes there. So we're doing some work on that and trying to feed in some information there. Fair trading is also an important element, also what banks are giving monies for. Now, the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank has revised its guidance on the kind of projects that they're going to invest in, and anything to do with forestry is going to require third-party certification. So again, there are ways that we can make sure that if you or your companies or your customers are thinking of doing some investments, that forest certification again can assist in that particular process. And finally, one of the areas that is really now grabbing people's attention is the question of timber tracking. We're looking at mechanisms, as our colleagues in FSC, to provide mechanisms to actually also reduce the time and effort that you and your staff do in looking at all of the certificates and checking that they're all up to date. By having a system in place where you can actually do all of that online, it would also be able to allow auditors to start finding out where there are maybe areas where there seems to be more supply than there may be, there may be actually a real supply there. So it'll allow for a better identification of bottlenecks within the supply chain, and that should help reduce auditing costs and also help reduce the costs of certification per se, but increase the amount of information and the robustness of the systems that we have created. So in conclusion, certification of wood-based products is going to increase, and especially in Asia, with the developments that have been taking place in China, in India, and also in Indonesia. And this is going to, and also the linking of certification into a whole range of other sustainability processes. So certification is going to increase fairly rapidly over the next few years. There's going to be increasing market demand through public procurement for proven sustainable wood-based and paper products, such as PEFC. So if you don't have chain of custody certification, you should definitely get it. And if your customers don't have it, you should try and encourage them to have it as well so they can communicate. And if your suppliers don't have it, definitely the suppliers should be supplying you with certified products and be able to give you all the information that you need for your own chain of custody if you have one. 2/3 of the world's supply is PEFC, so having PEFC increases and secures your market access. It increases your competitive advantage over uncertified companies, and it reduces your business risk in allowing you to source from more certified sources and provide a greater range of certified products to customers. I would go as far as to say that certification is a very important investment in your market share development. If you haven't got chain of custody certification, please think about what's happening here. You need to have it at some stage. Your customers are going to demand it, and it's something that you're going to have to do this in order to maintain access to the marketplace. We said forest certification is voluntary. It is a voluntary system. But increasingly, with procurement policies and demands from your customers, you're going to have it to make sure that their needs are met. You should make certified products part of your offer, and you should basically work with your suppliers to make sure that they are certified and can become certified. And I've met, for example, quite a few retailers who basically say, but we're at the end of the line, we don't need to be certified. That may be true if you are basically allowing all of your suppliers to use their labels on your products. A lot of people don't want to do that. But for example, when I talked to the Kingfisher Group, one of the largest retailer groups, their flagship, the B&Q, has become PEFC and FSC dual certified, 2 for the price of one audit, 2 badges. to allow all of their labeling. And the reason they did that was so that when their suppliers were saying, well, why are you asking us to do something you're not doing? They said, you know, we are also certified, so we're not asking you to do anything that we're not doing. And it allows them also then to make their own decisions as the final brand owner as to how to label and what to label, and not have to rely on using other people's labels. So encourage everyone who hasn't got a chain of custody to get one so that they have that opportunity to use the logo to demonstrate to customers that they're supporting responsible forest management. And I come back to that initial slide which shows that customers, all else being equal, will prefer to choose an eco-label. So if you have got certified products, you should use the labeling as part of your marketing activities.